Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the 6-5 podcast. I'm playing the host, riding the controls today, Daniel Newman, principal analyst at Futurum Research, joined by my always esteemed co-host in crime, Mr. Patrick Moorhead. Mr. Moorhead, good morning.
Daniel, how you doing? Here we are back in the saddle after a incredible 6-5 summit. Back at 8 a.m. Central Time is the greatest time to do a pod with my buddy. I'm doing great. Looking forward to this. It was a big week. I think we both have bags under our eyes. I think I'm 13 years older than you, so it's expected from old guys like me.
Yeah, but you wear makeup, so we all know that, Pat.
Only on my forehead.
I only have to draw in my eyebrows, but the light. But in all seriousness, it was a great week. 6-5 summit last week. We took a week off the pod, but if you weren't paying any attention, we had a 50-plus session summit over 30 of the world's largest tech companies, all available on demand at the65summit.com. Pat, I think we drew over almost 60 press citations, including mentions in CNBC, Bloomberg, Reuters, Investor Place. Even got a little bit of credit for an interview you did with Mr. Jensen Huang and Simon Siggers on the ARM-Nvidia deal for the stock's rise last week, right out of our event. And not to mention news breaking there from AWS and Intel. So the event, it grew up right before our eyes. It went from being a thought leadership event to a thought leadership, press, investor, news event, and next year will only be bigger, but we're not going to do too much touting of that today. Too much to talk about. Coming out of the week, we've got all kinds of announcements. I know, Pat, in the old days when we used to travel, this was the last kind of busy week because you'd head into the 4th of July, everything would slow down, and you'd get like a month and a half, and then everything picked back up end of August. Not the case anymore, not in a digital world. So we're going to be talking about the big Windows 11 launch, Salesforce and AWS partnership announcement. HPE had their big Discover event. Oracle, Google, AMD all dropped news. And there was more. So we've already got some stuff lined up for next week. We're going to have to come back to that. All right. But before we dive in, disclaimer time real quick. This show is for information and entertainment purposes only. And while we will be talking about publicly traded companies, please do not take anything Pat or I say as investment advice. You ready to dive in? You ready to dive in?
I'm ready to dive in. Let's do this. Let's light this candle.
Let's light this candle. Mr. Moorhead, first topic, Microsoft, after quite some time on their Windows 10 platform, which was a big improvement from the 7-8 generation that drew people all kinds of ire, put Windows back on the map, but people were ready for more. Not Moorhead, but Mr. Moorhead.
They do want more.
But people were ready for more. They were ready for what was next. And you and I both attended the big Windows 11 launch. But in the spirit of friendship, I'll let you take this one first.
I appreciate that. So we've been riding Windows 10 for many, many years. And the thesis was that Windows 10 was going to be the last number in the operating system, and it was going to be Windows as a service. And I think a few things changed. So first off, the value of the PC as a platform went up. We saw this with COVID. But also, I think Microsoft realizes that it's more dependent on its hardware ecosystem that requires generational lifts to drive new hardware purchases and to drive new features and improved experiences. So there was so much to cover. And I want to give you a little view of what it looks like. And as you can see, it looks different. I mean, the start menu being in the lower left-hand corner is no longer a thing. And very much like Chrome OS, it is right in the center. Also notice that all the curves, there are no sharp corners. This is a gentler, kinder operating system. The other thing that I want to point out is anybody who uses multi-monitor will understand this. And I am being irradiated by 4 displays right now, 2 4K, 1 3K, and a 2K. Your applications will auto-magically snap to the right place. It will remember where it is. Now, Dell had a utility that I used on a 49-inch display that would do this, but this is built right into the operating system. You know, sometimes you'll accidentally unplug a display, Daniel, or you'll power off and you come back and like all of your applications are in the wrong place. This fixes that. Maybe not a big thing for new users, but I think it's pretty huge. The other thing that's cool is Microsoft is all in on collaboration. So much so they built Teams into the operating system and into the start menu. And not only can you do Teams, but you can also do iOS messages via SMS and classic text messages. So they've merged your phone and they've merged Teams. I'm hoping the Teams will be a lot quicker, being that it's built into the operating system. It's almost guaranteed. Gaming, listen, AAA gaming, Microsoft owns. No, you know, they added some performance features to this. New version of DirectX 12, direct storage. Apple can barely run a full library of AAA games, so I think this is just piling on the advantage here. I'm going to skip this because these are new, what I would call live tiles. They're not calling that, but they're calling them widgets. But we've had widgets and live tiles inside of Windows for forever. Let's get to the store, okay? First off, any type of application that runs on Windows can be hosted at the store. That's big. Second, 0% if you do not use Microsoft's Commerce Engine, 15% if you do. Compare that to Apple Store, which is 30%. And then for smaller ISVs, 15%. I totally view this as a shot across the bow to make life more difficult for Apple in the global investigations that it has on this. Microsoft says it's going to be faster, and I certainly hope so because the current Windows Store is slow. But boom, there's more Android frickin' applications on the PC. Add that to Windows and Linux, and Windows is quickly becoming the most open operating system on the planet. Interestingly enough, they went with the Amazon App Store. I'm sure there's some financial arrangements going on there. I wouldn't imagine that Google would have an issue with this, but we'll probably never know the details below this. But still, running Android apps on your Windows 11 platform. It was a little confusing at first because the company said they were using Intel Bridge technology, and then everybody freaked out about that. And said, oh my gosh, what about AMD and Qualcomm? Well, AMD's covered and Qualcomm's covered. AMD is covered through Intel Bridge. No details yet on how Qualcomm will run it, but it would seem like Qualcomm on ARM would be running, even though it's an abstraction. You have to abstract it. You wouldn't have to abstract it for x86. You'd have to abstract it for Android to Windows, but it seems like it would perform really well. And we also talked about security. There's no image there, but I think the biggest commercial feature is this element of a zero trust architecture where everything needs a password or everything needs a key or everything needs to be a registered app. I believe that this is a big shot across the bow for Chrome OS. It's removing most of the security challenges. Being open has kind of downsides, but being open and having zero trust is incredible as well. So all in all, I think this is really good for OEMs, really good for ODMs. And, I had been pre-briefed on this stuff. And I'll tell you, Daniel, I didn't know at first, right? I wasn't all in on this. I didn't understand how some stuff we're doing. But if I look at the consumer side, which is running Android apps and beautiful and some improvements, I have to actually get my hands on it to see how integrated Teams and accelerated Edge works. But then the zero trust on that. I mean, zero trust could drive an entire upgrade cycle on the commercial PC side, which is making everybody very, very happy.
Yeah, so it's lunchtime now, so we're gonna keep. No, just really quickly, just to wrap this up, I sort of broke it down just into a couple of pieces here. The launch focused on touch, speed, security, privacy, collaboration, AI, and then of course the evolving silicon support. In terms of the overall play, look, M1 changed the game. We're not. I'm not going to sit here for a minute and say that. Windows and Intel and everyone just needs to worry about Apple, but the M1 ecosystem is changing, and this was a good moment for Windows to come up with something new, something a little sleeker, something a little sexier, and something that's going to be very compelling for that both commercial and consumer space. Driving on gaming, driving on app ecosystem, driving on being open yet being secure. All those things are part of this story. Of course, over the next few months, we're going to get the hardcore reviewers to get underneath the hood. We're going to hear how happy people are. Pat, you will be one of those people. I know you love to pull things apart, break them, and put them back together. I will read your review, and meanwhile, I will keep looking at those big picture views. But I think overall, good time, good moment. Overall, a solid launch, and let's keep moving here. So, new partnership announcement. AWS and Salesforce came out guns blazing, full swing at Salesforce's Trailhead DX event, making a big announcement. First of all, let me just say this. AWS takes its partnerships very seriously. If you hear AWS coming out and saying, we're going to make a partnership, and in this level of partnership, you can be sure it's very serious. Not to say that Salesforce or any other company that announces partnerships don't take it very seriously, but as I always say, AWS is very meticulous in these kinds of things. The companies basically came together, and again, the news is that the two are going to work together to deliver and unify developer experiences and create this new intelligent application ecosystem. The underpinning and the story here, because remember, 6.5, we do deep analysis. We don't break too much news. You guys can all read. We know that. We want to tell you what it means. And as I see it, it kind of meant a couple of things. First of all, two what I would call market leaders in their respective spaces. I'm talking market leadership by the actual market size and percentage of market share. In CRM, business applications, Salesforce is still the leader. In IaaS, AWS is the leader. They're competing with fully vertically integrated stacks in terms of Google and Microsoft most specifically. But of course, Oracle also has a pretty extensive stack. We're going to talk more about what Oracle is doing to attract some business here in the near future. What I really like about this partnership is the deep level of integration and interoperability that's being created between these two companies. They're basically doing developer swapping all the way down to the core, meeting in the middle at the platform to basically say everything from your RDS on the database side, your storage systems, full integration so that essentially the vertical integration of AWS and Salesforce operates and functions much like you would say what Microsoft is trying to build with Azure all the way up through its business and productivity tools and with Teams. I think this meant a couple of other things that are worth pointing out from an analysis side. First of all, I believe it's the end of any near-term consideration that Salesforce might be getting into public IaaS. This was a dedication and a commitment from Benioff to work side by side with AWS to deliver, the cloud through this partnership. The second thing is we've heard Benioff talk about what Slack is going to mean to its ecosystem. Well, through the intelligent application development, you start to think of it this way. Think about Slack plus Chime plus Salesforce CRM and Salesforce apps, plus the AWS platform and infrastructure, and you put it together, and you really have now two companies, maybe three, with Google Workspace coming together to compete on that full integration. But you can be sure that the intention of Mark Benioff and the Salesforce team is that when Slack acquisition is finalized, that Slack becomes the center of its business operating system and ecosystem. And by the way, does this remind you at all of anything that, I don't know, Microsoft is doing with Teams? This is the future. We will operate out of a centralized, a centralized stack that's not going to be email plus applications. It's going to be Teams. It's going to be Slack. It's going to be your Google Workspace. This is the technology that Salesforce needed to be able to do this. And by the way, we've seen AWS slowly get into some more software. They've gotten more into some analytics tools, gotten more into, the Chime contact center. But you start putting it all together and you have a very complete solution. However, my last thought, because I want to leave just a little bit for you since you left nothing for me on the last one, is that the development in the actual developer ecosystem is complex, and this has to work from a management, deployment, continuous improvement, innovation, and development standpoint seamlessly for the market to see this as partnership as deeper than any other typically announced partnership between two big tech firms. I think it's going to get there. I think it's going to have a good result. And as I always say, when tech competes, you win. So in the end, all these companies are going to be pushed to innovate faster. Two very good companies in a very competitive space. Solid partnership.
You left me
nothing.
That's okay.
Yes.
So
I'm kidding.
No. If you one thing I brought up when Salesforce bought Slack was this is going to be. You ever heard the definition of a boat? Right. It's a hole in the water that you just keep piling money into. That's what I said would have to happen here. Right. You're going to have a video property, and you're going to have a productivity property to fully compete with Google and Microsoft. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Right. You have Chime, which ironically I use almost every day, which is more about APIs and what you can do with that than the actual experience, because the experience isn't great when compared to best in class. But that to me is about UI, not about the pipes, and it's the pipes that Salesforce wants here. But I will have caution again. What is their productivity answer here? Word processing, documents, and people are going to say, "Oh, you're just an old Gen X guy or a boomer." I'm not a boomer. I'm Gen X. But no. Sorry, business still runs on spreadsheets, presentations, and documents.
Well, Pat, really quickly, because I want to make sure. They did acquire a company called Quip. Nobody has really heard about it or talked about it.
No, exactly. Stop right there. Okay. Exactly. And maybe we should say the world is run on Microsoft Office 365 and Google Workspace. Yep. Okay. Whether you're a kid, a student, and how much money is going to have to be poured in that to be relevant, to go up against Microsoft and Google. And by the way, 10 years ago, I was saying the same thing with Google Workspace. Now, Google Workspace is 100% compatible backwards and forwards with what is the standard in business documents, which you could argue is primarily Microsoft and a little bit of Adobe in there. Here's the second thing. Microsoft and Google must be laughing. So what's AWS OPINC, Daniel? 31%.
Oh, sorry.
OPINC, let's just pretend that they got a deal of 10% that gets them to 20% OPINC. That pretty much means that AWS is going to be taking a tremendous amount of margin away from this entire thing. I think this is a great deal for AWS. I see Salesforce pouring just an inordinate amount of money. But I'm with you, man. More competition is better. Salesforce is going to have to pour a tremendous amount of resources in this to extend this to something beyond having to work closely with Google and Microsoft, and at the same time losing 20 points to AWS. So great deal for AWS. Question mark at Salesforce. It is interesting though how we had these consumer walled gardens, and now we've got commercial walled gardens, right? And I can't help but to wonder, like, where does SAP fit into this? Anyways, that's for another pod. But it's a cool deal, if nothing else. A lot of great discussion.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. There's a lot to unpack there. We could do a few turns here, but we don't do that too much here on the 6.5. We try not to, because otherwise it becomes the 6.12, 6.20. We just need to do like a marathon one of these days and actually not try to control our time and see how long we go. It would probably be ridiculous. So let's move to the next topic, Pat, and this will be a little bit of a lengthier one before we have some faster hits that'll take us home. But HPE this week had their big Discover event. You and I have been tuning in since Monday. It really ran all week long. Ton of announcements. You've written a few pieces on Forbes, some good ones. We've got a bunch of the different announcements highlighted. You and I both did some on-camera analysis. I believe you jumped on theCUBE and talked about it. I actually did the post-mortem on Antonio's keynote right on the HPE's event network. So we were getting early and often, Pat. We were looking and talking about it. It'll be hard for us to kill all the oxygen here because there's so many things to talk about. I'll let you go first and see if you leave me at least a few things to chomp on at the end.
Yeah, so first off, this was the most comprehensive Discover that I've seen in probably 5 years. I think it was 4 years ago, Antonio introduced GreenLake in Western Europe, but this was just it was huge. And what I'm going to talk about is GreenLake. And the announcements came over really a 2-week period, right? They made acquisitions, they updated GreenLake, they pretty much updated everything. And I'm going to show you my article because it's pretty awesome on Forbes. But basically, they took enterprise on-prem as a service infrastructure to the next level. They did two things. First of all, they went vertical, and they went vertical in areas that I feel like HPE has core competencies in, and also that there are robust ISVs. So GreenLake for 5G core systems. So basically 5G as a service. And that's using their own software. GreenLake for EMR, using Epyc and Cerner. GreenLake for Splunk. We interviewed Splunk CEO Doug Merritt, which was awesome on that. And also we interviewed Kumar Srikanti, HPE CTO and software head for the 6.5 Summit. So going vertical, right? It's natural, right? You build out horizontal, and then you go vertical. And not that they're done going horizontal. Is, by the way, I'm going to leave all the horizontal stuff to you. But they also came out with this new service called Lighthouse. So HPE GreenLake Lighthouse. And essentially what this is more of a cloud-like experience when it comes to options, order processing, and setup. So, I've talked to some HPE GreenLake customers and some partners, and there's still a lot of paperwork involved. And you can literally get all the options on-prem with GreenLake, and you want another network adapter? Sure, we'll bring that in, right? You want it from Lenovo? We'll integrate everything for you. Lighthouse is GreenLake going on scale, less options, less complication for partners, and I think this is truly their big play. And if I look out 5 years, I would say 75% of their sales of their service revenue is going to be Lighthouse. And Daniel, actually, let me add one more, and I'll flip it over to you. HPE introduced Silicon on Demand. And Silicon on Demand, by the way, IBM Z has been doing this forever, where they have latent cores, or you can reassign cores to do other work, or you can add cores during peak times and only spend more money then. So partnering with Intel, and HP is the first one to do this, and I believe they've got a 6-month exclusive on this, where let's say you come in with a 40-core processor and you're only paying for 25. You only need 25, but when you need the other 15 cores, you pay more for the service. You pay more for GreenLake. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's so smart, and that gets more to a cloud model. That's what you do with AWS. You need more processors, you need more servers. You go up there and you go to the AWS Cloud Console and you add more servers. So hats off to these guys. I feel like, Daniel, they did move it forward. I still think they're the one to beat right now. Right now, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Dell Technologies is going to go after them from a scale play, right? PCs and infrastructure and a lot more diverse infrastructure, right? Like Isilon is essentially mainframe storage, right? HP doesn't do that stuff. And then you'll have pure plays like Pure, who are rocking it, and I think have an exceptional storage as a service function. So they're in the lead. There's a lot of competition, a lot of opportunity for people to move places here.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. So a lot of ground covered there. I think I want to just touch quickly on where we're at with HPE. Remember, it was going on 2+ years ago that Antonio Neri, CEO, came out and said, we are going to be the XS company, or the everything as a service company. If you would have at the time told me that the company would be this far along in terms of building out its services, I would have probably never believed you.
But I said that in my article too.
This was a big iron metal core, infrastructure company, made its life on selling big, hard infrastructure, big dollars. And this kind of pivot is you cannot underestimate the complexity of making this type of shift. However, I give a lot of credit to the executive team. I give a lot of credit to Antonio, some key hires like Keith White, who's leading the Greenlight business, came in from Microsoft, brought a much more software-centric mentality into the business. And the company's kind of doing a few things that I think have been really impressive. First, it has done a good job of bringing these services. What you mentioned with Lighthouse, look, we are seeing the forces come to the middle. The forces of public cloud is not the answer for everything. The public cloud is addressing this through a series of upgrades and improvements and new offerings to be more hybrid focused. But these enterprises have massive deployments of infrastructure on-prem in their own data centers, and doing the public cloud version of hybrid isn't easiest for all of these companies. And HPE, and as you mentioned, Dell, Cisco, IBM, they all understand this, and they're trying to build better and better mousetraps to address this. The other thing I think HP has done really well is verticalizing in terms of industry vertical, coming out with approaches to deal with some of these really complex industries. So financial services and healthcare, in industries where you have high demands for regulatory compliance, they're building out and structuring offerings that have been really pre-canned with best practices incorporated to deal with compliance and regulatory needs. One other thing to mention, Pat, I also thought there was some good launches. You had a great piece on Aurora. Security is being a zero trust. Where'd you hear that in this podcast? Zero trust approach to security through HPE. That's a big announcement that took place here. Not something to be ignored because there were so many announcements, though. We didn't even get to that. And then the other thing, there was an acquisition that came out on Monday before, a company called Determined AI. The ML and training capabilities, and HPE having a software narrative to develop scale. And this was a full stack thing. It wasn't a dollar disclosure. So we don't know, the size of this deal, but from a capability standpoint, you're talking about from data prep to model training and development to model deployment, a new stack that's pretty comprehensive, plugs into the public cloud, plugs into on-prem, supports the biggest, everything from Apache Spark all the way through to TensorFlow, so that people can build, deploy, train, scale their AI. And this is something that's going to be a really big thing going forward. Pat, overall, again, this is one of those things that I probably could just keep going and, but we're only through 3 topics. We're 30 minutes in. This means that I'm being terrible at hosting our 6-5 30 podcast. So I'm going to keep us moving. Look for more articles. We'll put them in the show notes. We both have a ton coming out from ourselves and our teams. A lot of coverage here. Let's keep going. Next topic, Oracle. Pat had a pretty big announcement this week. It wasn't a big announcement in the sense of any big new service being deployed, but what Oracle really announced this week is we are going to be relentless in pursuing our existing customer database to start porting over more and more business to our cloud. And what did this mean? Well, essentially, Pat, it meant that the company came out with some very aggressive credit structure for companies that start to deploy Oracle Cloud workloads for their Oracle current Oracle service and support contracts that are in place. And we're talking about, 25 cents on the dollar of cloud credits. And here's the thing. Oracle has approximately, I think it's like 400,000 customers. Okay. Yeah. Thus far, we have not yet heard anything from Oracle about how much revenue OCI is actually generating. What we are hearing is the business is doubling on a quarter-over-quarter base, on a year-over-year basis each quarter. So it's getting to be very, very serious in terms of a focal point for Oracle. Their Gen 2 cloud has legitimized, and if you add in the autonomous Linux, autonomous database services, it's becoming a more compelling story. But what the company really needs to do is it needs to start converting at scale its customers that are running Oracle's unlimited license agreements, customer support agreements, start getting them into Oracle's cloud. That's the most natural progression to grow that business. Well, this offering says, hey, we're going to entice you. If you're thinking about going to one of those other big clouds, we want to make it more attractive for you to start putting your workloads here. It's legitimate. It could save companies, you're talking millions of dollars over their lifetime. I think now that Oracle's cloud has become more legitimized, it's up-leveled its technology. It's got a hybrid answer with its cloud at customer. I think they just announced actually a pretty big win at Deutsche Bank just this week. This announcement, Pat, I think was, again, I don't think it requires a 45-minute conversation, but I think what was it? If you went with the unlimited license agreement, I'm just trying to make sure I got this right, you could get your rate up to 33% rewards, meaning a unlimited license customer with Oracle technology license support bill of $500,000 could eliminate that bill entirely by spending about $1.5 million in the OCI in Oracle's cloud infrastructure. So interesting news, big news. But like I said, the big story is, can Oracle raise the percentage of net sales expansion of its current existing customers to move over to its cloud?
Yeah, it was interesting. They pulled out Larry Ellison, founder, chairman, CTO, to do this. And whenever you pull Larry out, it's got to be big. But what ended up being was a good old fashioned promotion, right? And leveraging their strength, two strengths actually now. So good stuff from Oracle. I've got a write up coming. Not a very long one because this is pretty straightforward, but they got slammed on their CapEx last earnings, and they're going to buy a bunch of cloud infrastructure, and now they're filling it.
Well, Pat, this will be it's a long tail move. Can it be sticky in the long term? So let's keep talking cloud, but let's talk Google Cloud. Actually, a couple of your favorite topics, chips and cloud. We usually say chips and SaaS, but we'll do chips and cloud. Google Cloud made a big move, big announcement with AMD Epyc.
Yeah, interesting enough, Google did this on day 4 of the 6.5 Summit, not at the summit, but during Chip Day, when AWS announced the Graviton 2 challenge, which I found fascinating. But essentially, Google has multiple types of compute instances, as you would expect. And actually, let me flash that up here right now. So you've got E2, N2, T, C, M, and A, all for different type of workloads. And where they placed third gen Epyc was in scale out workloads. Now, my experience with Google goes back a long way. In fact, when I was at AMD in early 2000, they were my largest customer. They were the largest customer for Opteron. So there's a lot of history. I guess that would be 16 years of history between Google Cloud. And in fact, there was no external Google Cloud. It was all internal. One of the fascinating things I find here is that they said it's the best, and I'm gonna put this up here. It is the best instance in the industry for scale out. Okay, now that's interesting in a couple things, but I think most interesting is that Google Search, I would say, is likely the largest scale out application on the planet. Okay, so that gives me to, hey, Google, if it's so good, why don't you put it inside? By the way, I asked Google this and kind of crickets. So this just Pat Moorhead. I feel like they're going to use third gen Epyc to build out internal applications, and I think that is really good. Here's the other thing I want you to notice. Check this out. Going straight after Graviton 2 and Azure, 42% better price performance on scale out apps. Oh, benchmarks, not benchmarks, boom. There we go. All over that. So interesting stuff. Now, CoreMark, when I saw that, I kind of laughed. Spec rate is better, but I do want to see applications that they roll out. By the way, we've got a great comment in here from Ian Cuttress, basically saying disabling multi-threading. So each vCPU is a full core, and that does matter here, quite frankly, because it gives ultimate reliability to a workload. Not meaning it breaks, but performance consistency. And Graviton 2, right? They don't support multi-threading either. And the reason why the hyperscalers like that is for that very reason, a more consistent and reliable, because a vCore off of SMT isn't as consistent as a full core. But good news for AMD. We're going to see if we're going to see what this means for AMD a little bit later. But anyways, all goodness. And I'm not saying I would correlate these things, but Navin Shenoy, within a few days of this getting announced, left Intel, who ran DCG. But
yeah, there was a lot of news correlation or non-correlation last week, and causation is not correlation. But what we do know is that Google should probably pick the 6.5 Summit to make these kinds of announcements next time. Wait, what?
Seriously, as opposed to dropping it right on the same day. But anyways.
Well, everyone was at our event. I didn't even hear about this till you told me, because we were all, everything that was happening in semiconductors. What did we have? CEOs from AMD, Intel, NVIDIA, ARM, Lattice, Marvell,
Qualcomm.
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty busy. So, but this looks like a one to dig into deeper. Google continues to look at ways to differentiate its story to the market, and of course, AMD's had a lot of success. Epyc has been should we say it's been epic for AMD? But let's keep moving, Pat, because we're about to hit that 40-minute mark. That's too long, but we got a quickie here at the end, and it's kind of a fun topic. But kind of very quietly, a filing came out from Plus, ticker HCIC, Hennessy Capital, its investment corp, and they're taking Plus, the trucking AV autonomous trucking company, public. And Amazon, in their filing, noted that they're retrofitting, I believe it's 1,000 Amazon delivery vehicles with Plus's technology. You and I caught this quiet little announcement coming out. But for Plus, a company both of us have been tracking and talking about that have huge business, in the US in the retrofitting space, as well as new, and in China in the new delivery of next generation deployments of autonomous trucks, which is going to be a huge business. The company, Amazon, has made a commitment to purchase at least 1,000 of these retrofit units. This is a really big thing because, right now what they're really talking about is a, driver supported, what is that, Pat? L2 plus is where it's in market right now. But this is really working towards L4-5 type of autonomous delivery capabilities. And we all know that Amazon, with its scale of delivery, with things like drones, has been very aggressively in market looking at how does more stuff get to more places with less overhead. I mean, that's the bottom line. And if we can get to a point where their trucks, where Plus could potentially augment the technology to get merchandise from point to point in a lower cost manner. This has a fuel implication. This has a safety implication. This also has a cost of delivery implication. And, 1,000 is probably considered, Pat, a small number for early on, but this could become tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, making Plus much more of a plus in the market, and also potentially aiding Amazon's next generation growth. So a little news item, but a big news item. Big rigs, big trucks, big deliveries, and Amazon is getting in financially backing this SPAC. So what do they say, Pat? The SPAC is back, or is it back the SPAC? But either way, Amazon has invested in Plus, which is a good sign for the company.
Listen, Amazon doesn't make investments willy-nilly. Like you said, they don't do deals, they don't do investments. It's pretty clear to me that they're all in on Plus for next generation trucking here. And I think that's a huge deal for Plus because, quite frankly, Plus signed up the largest trucking company in China. So get your SPACs ready. This is about to get liftoff, but remember, this show is for entertainment and education purposes only. Do not take what we say as investment advice.
Well, there we have it, buddy. We have crossed all the topics of the week. There were a few more. We'll get to them next week. But a big week. We got to Windows. We got Salesforce, AWS, HPE, Oracle, Google, AMD, and Plus, and so much more. For everyone out there, thank you as always for tuning in to our weekly edition of the 6-5 podcast. We try to give you all the analysis. We try to tell you what you need to know, and we hope to be your home, at least if you're going to listen to one show about what's what in enterprise tech and consumer tech, true, I guess, all tech. This is the place to be. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, join us each week, share it with your friends, hit us up on social. If you have good things to say, it's at Daniel Newman UV. Not so good things, it's at Patrick Moorhead. But for this episode, it's time to say goodbye. So thanks for tuning in. We will see you later.
Have a great weekend, everybody.